What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. Because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Friday, September 30th, 2016. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. Last day of the month. October starts tomorrow. Got to start getting ready for Halloween and the little kiddies for their annual extortion racket. Give us treats or we'll do things to your house. So we have to get ready for that. We have a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And again, like yesterday, if you hold off the calls unless they're really, really important, because we've got a lot of stuff to go through. Quick little program note, reminder, the Lady Claire is not going to be joining us in hour number 3. She has a scheduling conflict. We got a lot of stuff coming up here in the next few weeks that we have to be dealing with. Now, let's start with the war zones, because at this rate, and I'm not the only person saying this, it's looking like we're going to be in a full-on hot war by the end of the year. And that's a depressing prospect. And it looks like Syria is one of several flashpoints. And there's a very interesting article that came on out, this in MiddleEastEye.net. And the U.S. is out there saying Aleppo must not fall. And U.S. allies to flood city with anti-aircraft missiles. Now, fall of Aleppo is a very revealing phrase in that what the U.S. is trying to prevent is Aleppo from being run by Syria's legitimate government. That's what they're really talking about. Oh, the government's back in charge. Aleppo has fallen. And given that ISIS and Al-Qaeda do not have aircraft, these man-pads are clearly intended for use against the warplanes of Syria's legitimate government and against Russia's aircraft, who we have to remember were invited into Syria to assist the legitimate government. In contrast, the United States has no legal right to be in Syria, let alone waging war against Syrian forces. They're trying very hard to pretend that this is not a U.S. invasion, but that is exactly what it is. Now, Ron Paul came out with an article. This was over in 21st Century Wire, saying Syria's been in chaos ever since Obama said Assad must go. And Obama said Assad must go right after Assad said, no, we're not going to let you build a pipeline across Syria to make it easier for Israel to sell the oil they're stealing from Syria to Europe. And at that point, Assad went to the top of the special high-interest targets list. And again, the U.S. doesn't have a legal right. And now they're going to be pushing the humanitarian thing again. Oh, it's a humanitarian disaster. We have to save the Syrian people from the cruel tyrant who has brought all this war and devastation. And it's the same dog and pony show we got from Iraq and Afghanistan. And we know who brought the death and destruction, and it's not Bashar al-Assad. And everybody's getting sick and tired of the U.S. bovine excrement, mostly because it's nothing but reruns over and over and over again. They can't come up with an original idea. Now, over in Russia, their foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, is out there saying the U.S. is protecting the terrorist groups. And right now, they're working hardest to protect al-Nusra, because apparently al-Nusra is going to be the keystone of whatever plan B the United States has to get rid of Bashar al-Assad. Yes, ISIS are terrorists. Go ahead and kill them. Al-Qaeda's terrorists. Go ahead and kill them. We're done with them. They're of no more use to us. But we're going to protect al-Nusra because al-Nusra will get Assad for us. The U.S. has been trying to get rid of Assad for 5 years now. And look what they've done to yet another country which didn't do anything to us. Syria didn't attack us. Iraq didn't attack us. Afghanistan didn't attack us. Yemen didn't attack us. Libya didn't attack us. Somalia didn't attack us. The U.S. is doing all the attacking here. So we have this U.S. threat to arm Al-Qaeda and ISIS with anti-air missiles to take down Syrian and Russian warplanes. And the U.S. is playing this same old game. Well, we're not directly giving these man-pad missiles to ISIS and Al-Qaeda. They're coming from our allies around the area that they're sick and tired of Russia sticking their nose in, and really they're the source of all these weapons. And a reminder, if you have not already seen it, you need to catch the movie Charlie Wilson's War, about how the U.S. covertly armed the Mujahideen up in Afghanistan against the Soviet Union by laundering the weapons through other countries. Basically, the U.S. was behind the effort to get the Soviets out of Afghanistan, and they used other countries as fronts, in particular Israel, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia. But it was all originating from the U.S. funding, and they're replaying that same thing here again. We demand you get on out, and weapons will be coming in to kick you out. But they're not coming from us, honest, really. They're coming from the other countries around you. That's what's going on. Now, Russia is responding. Well, let's take a moment here to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. We're talking about Syria and the flashpoint for war there. Again, you hunt down the movie Charlie Wilson's War, and you'll see how the U.S. plays these games of covertly attacking other countries and then pretending that they've got nothing to do with it, which is what's going on here. Now, Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov was responding to State Department spokesslug John Kirby, saying that terrorists in Syria could launch attacks against Russian interests and Russian cities, and basically saying, we know who the terrorists are working for. We've even got a video clip on WhatReallyHappened.com today, where Hillary is saying, yes, we created Al-Qaeda. And so Russia is seeing this as the U.S. inviting or indeed ordering their terrorists to attack Russia. And it doesn't matter if it's terrorists or third-party weapons, everybody knows who the aggressor is this time. They've already lost security on this operation. When Charlie Wilson was playing his little games in Afghanistan, the vast majority of the American people didn't know what was going on. That's now different today. Now, a former CIA contractor, Stephen Kelly, in an interview with Russia Today, came on out and said that the U.S. has been the main sponsor of the Islamic State all along. It's a manufactured proxy group. It's a phony enemy. Right out of George Orwell's 1984, where the government creates the enemy. Emmanuel Goldstein, have your 2-minute hate. Because all governments need an enemy out there to scare you into obedience. I remember when the Soviet Union collapsed, and I think it was Gorbachev, when they were meeting in Iceland, and basically ending the Cold War. And Gorbachev said, I'm going to do the absolute worst thing to you imaginable. I'm going to deprive you of an enemy. And of course, with the Cold War over and Russia was our friend, the military-industrial complex went into a decline. And the American people started saying, well, where's the peace dividend? You've been spending most of our money on weapons to wag at the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union is gone. Start spending our money on us. And from the point of view of the government, the military-industrial complex, that could not be allowed to happen. So we needed a new enemy. And they had been working to bring back the Cold War. But those of us who are old enough to remember the original Cold War in the 1950s and 1960s, it was a scam. The Soviet Union was not a threat to the American people. The Soviet system was a threat to the money junkies because of socialism. But mostly it was all about scaring you out of your money and obedience and the lives of your children to feed the military-industrial complex, as President Eisenhower warned us was going to happen at the end of his term in office here. Now, there's another article over at Zero Hedge basically saying that the U.S. is going back to the cover story of humanitarian concern for the Syrian people. Well, if the U.S. was really concerned for the people of Syria, they wouldn't have started all this nonsense 5 years ago. But what they're getting ready to do, the U.S. is losing ground, the U.S. terrorists are losing ground to Russia and Syria. There's nothing that John Kerry can say that's going to get the Russians and Syrians to back down. So what they're going to try and do is now, we need a humanitarian invasion and regime change, a NATO-style invasion, because NATO are the good guys. We all know that NATO is the good guys. and the Russians are the bad guys. So they're really pushing. And I'll tell you one more thing. When this war really cranks on up, I guarantee you, you won't see any politicians or money junkies' kids on the front lines. If they're in the military at all, it'll be in those rear echelon areas where they're protected because they're such precious little darlings. And they're not supposed to be used as bullet stoppers. Your kids, that's what your kids are for. Your kids' role in all of this is to be shot up and have limbs blown off in the quest for more wealth and power. All right, so let's talk about the political campaign. Things are really jumping all over there. We've got a lot of news. And apparently Hillary Clinton, not on TV because she doesn't want to get caught out and YouTubed on this, but apparently out in her campaign rallies is still pushing this idea that FBI Director James Comey said that Hillary Clinton was truthful about her use of the private email server. Now, she has been called on this many, many times already. Comey already came on out and said, no, I didn't say that. And he had to repeat it again in front of the House Judiciary Committee, that he never, ever said Hillary Clinton was being 100% truthful about her use of a private email server, but Hillary's still using that on the campaign trail. Now, something else that's come out from these hearings. James Comey is saying it wasn't the FBI that gave Hillary's staffers immunity. It was the Justice Department. This came down from Loretta Lynch, following that really strange meeting out there on the runway in Los Angeles. And now we're hearing that Loretta Lynch would be considered for a Supreme Court judgeship under President Hillary Clinton. And more ordinary FBI agents, they're starting to break the silence. They're fed up. They're tired of looking like they're the villains that they have been. And things are coming on out. And FBI agents believe that Loretta Lynch and Clinton made the deal to give immunity to the Clinton staff in the email scandal out there on that airport runway, where Bill Clinton came on and said, you give all our people immunity, you're going to be a Supreme Court judge. And Loretta Lynch said, absolutely, we'll do that. All right, we're going to grab a phone call from John in Rancho Cucamonga. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello there, Mike. I don't think I've called your show much before, but
well, where were you?
Probably old. I'm probably just a little bit older than you are. I just turned 69 there a couple of months ago.
You have my deepest sympathies.
Yeah. Anyway, I vividly remember the 50s and the 60s, but I didn't know a damn thing was going on then, obviously. But what I've come to find out in my dealings with the IRS and the tax honesty movement, and reading books and going to seminars, and the history of it, and including the victory tax that was discussed and imposed during the war, and how it was after the war it was stopped. It was only good for a few years, till the end of the war. And what the reason why we had to have an enemy like Russia and China and so forth was so that people would rally around the flag and continue to want to pay income taxes and be a taxpayer.
Yeah, that's exactly it. To scare the people into surrendering their money, their freedoms, and the lives of their children. That's what it was all about.
You're right. It's a huge scam, but it's hard to get anyone's attention on this in this regard unless they're really. I know very few people who are involved in this, the way I am. Well, I don't mean that as a brag thing. I'm just saying, when I go to these tax seminars, I meet a lot of people who are. That's my point. So, but almost nobody, the average person, does not go to tax seminars. They fill the forms out, pay the taxes, and if we don't get this straight, we'll never get our country back.
Well, you're absolutely right about that. But these days, more and more people are taking a look at the tax honesty movement and its various ramifications, because we've hit the point right now where the vast majority of Americans simply can't pay anymore. Especially with that wallop they got from Obamacare. It's one thing when you're taxing people and they've got the money to pay the tax, and it's just easier to go ahead and give them the money over than to kick up a fuss. But when you reach the point where Americans are literally having to let their children go hungry to make the tax payments, then you've got angry people going on out and saying, is this really legal? How did this come about? Because in the original Constitution, a direct non-apportioned tax was expressly forbidden.
That's correct. That's absolutely correct. Yes. And the way Roberts, I was just laughing when he made the statement after someone tapped him on the shoulder and he postponed his announcement for a couple of days. And then he said, oh, yeah, it is justifiable as a tax on the non-act, or words to this effect, the non-activity of not being part of the Obamacare. So it would be a penalty, in other words. So if you didn't
they switch the words around, but the end result is the same. They are taking your money and spending it on Israel and the war machine. Something like 60% of all the tax revenues taken from you go to the war machine, Israel propping up. Well, no, actually 67% is just for the war machine. Then they take another chunk of the money, goes to Israel, another chunk of the money to prop up Wall Street. There is precious little left over of your money to spend on the American people. And in fact, I got something the other day from the local Quakers, and they were pointing out how very little of your tax money is spent on you. And what we need in this country is a cash for clunkers program, like they had for the cars, only this one is for the government. You take your old, bloated, costly, inefficient government, you take it over to the junkyard, you put it in a little machine, you mash it down to a coffee table, and you get it, everybody gets a check for $50,000 to buy a new, smaller, more efficient government. That's what we need in this country.
Well, you write it up and put the proposal together, Mike, and I'll sign it.
All right. All right. Cash
okay,
for a clunker government. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Clint in Las Vegas. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I'm watching this article by Breitbart. The whore says it's really hard for a woman to be tough and likable. And it really brought a tear to my eye, Mike. But I think she's losing. It reminds me back in 2008 when she cried, I had such a vision for America and all that, when she realized she's going to lose to Obama. And I think she realizes not only is she getting done in by a tsunami, there's enough white hats in the government who don't want her in there.
Well, Reuters is out there assuring us that she's still 5 points ahead in the polls, and we should believe Reuters, and we'll be talking about that. The issue of likability is not gender-specific. I dislike Hillary Clinton intensely, and it wouldn't matter if she's a man, a woman, or something in between, or even a space alien. I don't like her because of how she behaves, how she acts. It's not sexism. It is a common sense reaction to somebody who just has this unshakable sense of entitlement and ascendancy over all other human beings, and I reject that.
I hated George Bush Sr. for the same reason I hate her.
Yes. Well, I'm going to qualify that. I'm going to qualify that. I didn't like George Bush Sr., but it was easy to respect him. He was very, very capable. The problem with Hillary Clinton and those that she is surrounding herself with is they're goofballs. And not only do I not like her, I can't have any respect for her. She's clueless on so many of these things without somebody propping her up and whispering in her ear. At least George Herbert Walker Bush, as much as I disliked his policies, he was an enemy you could respect.
Yeah, but you knew he was a murdering bastard.
Absolutely. And he was darn good at it, too. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, ask John Kennedy. Hillary, she admits she's a bozo. That's why she can't remember any of her security interviews. She admits her brain's all gooped up, and that's why she did this. No, she admits she's a bozo.
And America needs a bozo for president, so vote for Hillary Clinton.
That's right, man.
All right, Clint.
You remember bozo? Yeah.
Going to have to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. More callers waiting on the line. More news to share with you, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to take 2 more phone calls, and then we're going to close the phone lines until I can get some of these other stories out of the way. James in Hawaii. Aloha, brah. What's up?
James actually dropped.
James has dropped. All right. Steve in Massachusetts. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hiya. Jim Rickers has been saying that today could possibly be the end of the petrodollar, where China's currency will be used throughout the world trade. And if you look what's going on within the recent 9/11 law, where the parents are able to sue the Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia is saying that if this were to happen, then they may drop the dollar, and this could be the first stage of the first country who may drop the dollar, and it may signal more countries along the way.
Yeah, the problem is every country that tries to sell their oil for a currency other than the dollar gets attacked. Saddam Hussein wanted to sell Iraq's oil for the euro. Muammar Gaddafi wanted to sell Libya's oil for the gold dinar. And, using anything other than the U.S. dollar is an invitation to be invaded. But if everybody does it at once, then obviously the United States is not going to be in a position to declare war against the entire world. So it is going to happen very quickly and all at once. We could see Deutsche Bank could kick off a major derivatives crisis that would make the U.S. dollar seen as virtually worthless overnight. Yeah, it could happen, and it could happen very, very fast.
Now, what I find strange is, why now? Why do they all of a sudden concerned about the 9/11? It's 15 years later. Why do they choose now to pass this about the people able to sue Saudi Arabia?
Well, I think there's a couple of overlapping agendas. One is to basically grab cash. I mean, our government is hopelessly in debt and desperately broke.
I guess so.
And they already tried to do it with Iran. Now they're trying to do it with Saudi Arabia, which is going to have repercussions. The other part of it is, of course, that world opinion is that 9/11 was done by the United States and Israel working together. And this is just another way of putting out the propaganda that Saudi Arabia was the mastermind of 9/11, which is the biggest piece of nonsense to come out of the U.S. government since the claim that Saddam had nuclear weapons.
Okay, yeah, I just find it kind of strange. And if you look at who didn't vote for the bill, it was who didn't show up was Bernie Sanders and Tim Kaine.
Yeah, but there's a development on that. Because of the backlash, Congress is actually going to go back and redraft the law. We'll be talking about that a little bit later in the show. All right, Steve, we're going to let you go. James in Hawaii came on back. Aloha, brah, what's up?
Yeah, hello. I called her on Monday, and you didn't want to talk about this, but I think it's important for your audience to know. You know that mortgage company that advertises they can sort out the mortgage for you? Well,
our advertiser will there's a disclaimer on the ad that says they're not lawyers. They'll do the research, but you still need to get your own lawyers.
Yeah, I understand. Well, the point is, what they do, one of the provisions of the Uniform Commercial Code is that every time a mortgage is sold, you have to go down to the tax assessors.
Yes.
And register that sale. So they have neglected to do that. They just put them all in these blocks, and there was some computerized system over in Delaware where they slice them, dice them, and sell them back and forth, and what have you. Now, a friend of mine is going through that process right now because he's on the third company he's paying since he's had the mortgage. Now he's on the third different company. I said, listen, go down there and find out if they have made the transfer or not. If they hadn't, then you need to file suit against them because they're already defrauding you. I mean, any percent.
They are, and actually, I'm going to have to let you go. I'm going to have to let you go because we're in a commercial break. But a lot of states are now suing that computerized mortgage transfer system because it was a way for the real estate agents and the bankers and the mortgage companies to evade title transfer taxes. So thanks for the phone call. We're going to close the lines for a while. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to close the phone lines for a little while here because I got a bunch of stuff to get through, and we'll open up probably in hour number 3. Getting on back to James and his concerns, a lot of the problem with the foreclosure epidemic that followed the 2008 collapse of the mortgage-backed security fraud had to do with something called the Mortgage Electronic Registration System. Now, this was a computer, and what they did was transfer all the titles for the mortgages in the bundles into this computer system. And at that point, they would move them around the mortgage bundles. And because the MERS was considered technically the owner of all of them, they didn't have to pay the title transfer fees. Several state governments have seen this differently and sued. But here's where things got a little unglued. It looks to me like there was a software problem with this mortgage electronic registration system. It was probably written by the same people who did Obamacare. And all of a sudden, the mortgages and the notes and the ownership started getting all messed up. And people were trying to go into court to foreclose on property without all the necessary paperwork because they couldn't find it. It got lost. And those who are foreclosing do have to follow the rules. And this led to an epidemic of document mills that for a fee would make fake foreclosure documents. And this in turn created problems where people's homes were being foreclosed on by banks that did not in fact have a mortgage on the property. In a couple of cases, homes that were owned free and clear were subject to foreclosure. It was just this Wild West attitude of going on out and grab. And documents were being faked. And I remember back then I went out on eBay and I got myself a little notary public seal to fake being a notary to make the documents look legal. And it was just this giant scam. Now, before we go back to the political news, I also want to mention another very famous lawsuit called the Credit River case. And this was a man who had been hit with a foreclosure notice, and he decided to defend it in court with a very novel approach. Because he went into court and he said, the bank didn't actually give me anything of any value. They just typed a number into my account. That's all they did. There was no consideration, which is a legal term meaning something of real, tangible value. And they even got the president of the bank to say that, yeah, that's what we do. When you take out a loan, we just type a number into your account, and that's it. And then you have to work and pay us back with interest. And the judge finally agreed and said, this is ridiculous. You're just typing numbers into an account. That's it. That's the only thing that you're doing. And he found for the defendant who got to keep his home. The story does not have a happy ending. The lawyer who represented the homeowner was disbarred on a technicality, and the judge died under suspicious circumstances. And ever since then, if you go into court on one of these foreclosure trials, the Credit River case is declared bad law, even though it's never been overturned. They just don't want to hear about it. Because you're supposed to believe that when you go to the bank and you take out a loan, they go into a vault and take some coins and they put it into your account. No, they just type it in. That's it. All they're giving you is your permission for you to buy a house. That's it. Their lordships, the bankers, say that you may live in this house as long as you promise to work and pay them until you die, which, by the way, is what the word mortgage means. A gage is another word for a pledge or a promise. Mort, death, that's what a mortgage is. A promise you will keep until your time of death. And all it cost the bank was a few keystrokes on a keyboard. That's it. That's the scam that we're all living under right now. Okay, getting on back to the In fact, I got an article called Bankers Gone Wild, which I'm going to repost on this next commercial break to WhatReallyHappened.com, so you can just see how it all came apart and was tangled up with fraudulent mortgages for the mortgage-backed securities, and they were using the same mortgage in different securities. Criminal fraud. These Wall Street bankers committed criminal fraud. Not one of them ever saw the inside of a courtroom. So getting back to politics, everybody is listening to James Comey's testimony before Congress, the hearing, and he's admitting all this stuff that went on, but still defending his position that he didn't feel a reasonable prosecutor would have charged Hillary Clinton. And now we're beginning to understand why. As you know, earlier in the week there was a revelation that President Obama, using a pseudonym, was communicating with Hillary Clinton on her private email server. And, of course, he stated publicly when this when the story first broke that he heard about it on the news media. He had no idea this was going on. So he got caught out lying. But he was using the server. And then there's those DNC leaks that came on out showing that the pay for play extended way beyond the Department of State under Hillary Clinton up to the White House itself. So in a nutshell, the reason the FBI has to let Hillary Clinton go free is because President Obama is just as guilty as she is for using that private server and engaging in pay-to-play corruption. If they prosecute Hillary, they have to prosecute the president. And if Congress had any gonadal tissue, they would have launched impeachment proceedings months ago. I mean, what we have is the head of the FBI has just admitted to obstruction of justice. They knew about the Reddit postings. They knew that the Clinton staff were engaged in the destruction of evidence in defiance of a subpoena ordering the preservation of those records, and they didn't prosecute. That's obstruction of justice. James Comey is as criminal as the rest of them. Now, we've got Black Lives Matter out there screaming once again that if we don't vote for Hillary Clinton, they will have riots across America, coast to coast. This came originally from a tweet from a rapper named Tef Po. Sounds like a character out of Kung Fu Panda. And basically posted a tweet, "Dear white people, if Trump wins, young N-words such as myself are fully heck bent on inciting riots everywhere you go, just so you know." Now, there's a problem with that. Remember Hitler's brown shirts? They were violent thugs that disrupted the rallies of Hitler opponents. They beat up opposition supporters, like the way Black Lives Matter beat up that man with a Trump hat in El Cajon near San Diego earlier in the week, and in general terrorized Germany into accepting Hitler as their new leader, and I'm sure you will all remember that didn't really work out very well for Germany. So keep that in mind when you see Hillary Clinton's thugs out there saying that they're going to start riots across America if Donald Trump wins. Now, because of the very angry backlash that came out of this, Tef Po has deleted his tweets, and now he's claiming that he's the victim of slander because he never tweeted it in the first place. But, of course, way too many people made copies of it, screen captures of it, and so he cannot take it back. Now, remember that big stink that came on out about Donald Trump saying that the Federal Reserve was making its policy decisions based on political expediency, trying to help Hillary Clinton's campaign by playing with the rates. And Janet Yellen came on out and said, "That's ridiculous to think we have a bias. Well, we're just bankers, we'll screw everybody equally here." But it turns out Federal Reserve Governor Lael Brainard has donated to Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign, and that's given Yellen a huge conflict of interest problem, because we are now seeing that the Federal Reserve is, in fact, engaging in partisanship. And there is a clear conflict of interest. Now, USA Today, in all of its 34 years of existence, they've had a no endorsement policy. They do not endorse presidential candidates in election years. This year they decided to make an exception in order to have an anti-endorsement against Donald Trump. Just screaming and frothing at the mouth, Donald Trump, he cannot be allowed to destroy their narcocracy. We have worked for decades to enslave America to drug lords. We want the confused, reckless, and brain short-circuit candidate, is what they're out there saying. Now, down in Ohio, up until recently, Hillary Clinton was leading the polls there. And the New York Times declared Ohio as the bellwether. That Ohio will tell us how the country will go. And Hillary is winning in Ohio, and that means she's going to win the country. Trump has just pulled ahead, and all of a sudden the New York Times is saying, Ohio? Who's paying attention to them? Come on, it's a little tiny. It doesn't count anymore. BuzzFeed put up their own version of an online poll. BuzzFeed is fully on board with Hillary's campaign. Trump was winning this online poll by a landslide, and BuzzFeed had to back off and say, well, just remember, this is an unscientific poll. It doesn't represent real people. Meanwhile, Reuters got caught yet again oversampling Democrats to generate their claim that Hillary Clinton is 5 points ahead of Donald Trump. They're oversampling Democrats out of proportion with the actual general population. Now, over at the Los Angeles Times and the USC poll, Trump is now at 47.3%, Hillary at 41.7%, and Trump is now at 17% of the black vote. And that was supposed to be a mainstay of Hillary's campaign. But the black leaders are out there, and they've nailed it on the head. Hillary is saying exactly what everybody wants to hear, and there's no way to know that she will ever keep her promise about any of it. Now, a lot of people are still wagging their finger at NBC's Lester Holt for very clearly having a bias and prejudice during the presidential debate, acting as Hillary's attack dog against Donald Trump. Whenever Donald Trump was going someplace Hillary didn't want to go, Hillary would do a little signal, and Lester Holt would leap in and say, we have to go over here. That's the end of the segment. We've got to do... And whatever. It turns out Comcast, which owns NBC, donated $5.6 million to the Democratic Party during the convention in Philadelphia. They literally bought that seat at the first debate to put Lester Holt into. And NBC is clearly also very biased. The whole corporate media is behind Hillary Clinton, and they're self-destructing in the process. And they're up against a terrible, terrible problem. Because they're trying to convince you, the American people, Hillary supporters don't take part in the online polls. They don't show up at the rallies. They won't buy her book, but we guarantee you they'll vote for her in November. And they may be right, because dead people don't participate in online polls. Dead people don't show up at rallies. Dead people certainly don't buy books. But the dead are definitely voting in this election. We're going to get into that in a couple of minutes here. Already we're seeing the signs of fraud. Trump is now leading in 5 battleground states: Nevada, Colorado, Iowa, Ohio, and North Carolina. And he took those leads after that first debate, despite Lester Holt's best efforts and all the cheating that Hillary could do. So let's talk about election fraud. Because it's out there, it's real, it's a problem. And 1 in 4 registered voters participating in the November election will use an electronic voting machine that does not have an auditable record. And by the way, analysts during the primary season showed that in precincts where there was an audit trail or hand-counted paper ballots, Bernie Sanders was winning. In the precincts with these electronic untraceable machines, Hillary Clinton was winning. There's very obviously a correlation there. Now, there's a story that has come on out from ChristianTimeNewspaper.com. At this point, I can't confirm it, but they're saying that election officials in Franklin County are dealing with a maintenance worker who found ballot boxes filled of ballots for the coming election already filled out for Hillary Clinton and Democratic candidates. And there were a dozen of these black sealed ballot boxes all ready to go to the counting center. And I've contacted the Franklin County Election Commission to get a confirmation or denial. I still have not heard back from them. It's not being covered anywhere else, nor would I expect the corporate media to be covering allegations of Democratic vote fraud. Now, apparently, we already know people in Colorado who have been dead for years are registered to vote in this election. And apparently there's been another such case discovered over in Virginia where the family of somebody who had died recently got this notification in the mail congratulating the dead person for registering to vote. And this is why Hillary's people are trying to get rid of voter ID laws. They're going to be using all these registered dead people, all the illegal immigrants. They're already telegraphing. Hillary knows she cannot win against Donald Trump in an honest election, and that's not going to stop her. She's going to steal this thing. And we, the people, have got a little over 35 days to figure out how we're going to stop her. And the best idea so far is, on Election Day, that everybody who votes for Donald Trump dress in red. I've already got a red shirt for that day. But for that to work, every Trump voter has to wear a red shirt. So it'll be instantly obvious who is voting, who was winning in that area. So when the media comes on out and says, you know, pay no attention to all those red shirts. There was a sale on red T-shirts the day before. It doesn't mean anything, and Hillary's your new ruler. So apparently a Democratic group, Harrisonburg Votes, they've actually identified one of these groups, was caught registering dead voters in Virginia. They're not even trying to hide this. The attitude coming out of the Hillary campaign is, I'm going to be your president if I have to kill every single one of you. Or words to that effect. All right, we're coming up on another commercial break. When we come on back, we're going to be talking about more election fraud, more about politics, more about the media, and then we're going to get back into the war zones because things are popping all over this planet. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And the reality is that the corporate media has gone so overboard to shove Hillary Clinton at America, it's starting to affect their audience. And here in the independent media, our numbers are definitely going up. And the corporate media's numbers are headed down. In fact, right now, over at CNN, the Clinton News Network, their ratings have now sunk below that of the Gardening Network. That's how bad it is over there. If Donald Trump succeeds in winning the White House, evading the cheaters, not being assassinated, I see 2017 as the year when the independent media is going to hit its stride. And it's overdue, because the American people can't make good choices about their nation if they're being lied to by everybody in the government and everybody in the corporate media. All right, so let's get back to the war zones. There's been another U.S. drone strike up in Afghanistan that has killed at least 15 civilians. 13 are wounded. The United Nations is saying there needs to be an independent investigation on just why the U.S. is still sending these armed drones into Afghanistan and blowing people up. Now, the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, Jeffrey Piat, who was basically the ambassador during the whole coup d'etat, has been replaced by Marie Yovanovitch, and Piat has now been sent to be the U.S. ambassador to Greece. And a lot of people are looking at this and saying, is Athens the next target for a coup d'etat by the United States? Because the government in Athens is very resistant to the demands of the IMF, the World Bank, the ECB, the Fed. And what the U.S. wants in the ruling palaces and offices of every nation on earth are people who love the bankers, who will sacrifice anything to the bankers. Now, over in Yemen, Saudi Arabia is having to deal with a growing reality, which is that the resistance by the people of Yemen has proved to be a lot stronger than they anticipated. It wasn't a slam dunk, it wasn't a walk in the park, and even worse, the Yemen forces have succeeded in breaching Saudi Arabia's borders. They've carried out attacks on facilities inside Saudi Arabia, despite all the economic advantage and all the weapons provided by the United States of America. The people of Yemen do not want to live under foreign puppet rule, and who can blame them? Now, over in Iran, their interior minister is accusing Saudi Arabia of providing financial and intelligence support for terrorists operating in eastern Iran. We need to take a break for our top-of-the-hour station break. We'll be back in just a couple minutes. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 2, the phone line. Well, no, we've got a call waiting, but I'd still like you to all kind of hold back here until we can get some news out. And before I take this next phone call, I do want to hit a very important story that's going on. As you know, the U.S. Congress passed this bill that would allow the families of victims of 9/11 to sue Saudi Arabia for supporting terrorism, with the accusation of supporting terrorism at the judge's discretion. No evidence required. And this was a bad idea. It's a bad legal precedent. Obama vetoed it, and Congress overrode the veto. And the Saudis are rejecting this law as a threat to their sovereignty, and they're absolutely right. That's what the law says. Sovereign immunity does not apply in the case of nations carrying out acts of terror, such as, well, Israel and the United States. Saudi Arabia issued warnings over consequences, such as selling all their U.S. assets immediately. And to nobody's surprise, all of a sudden, Congress is now backtracking on the bill. The White House is already saying they obviously have a case of buyer's remorse. The House and Senate leaders admitted there might be unintended consequences of this law, such as Saudi Arabia pulling all of their money, $750 billion, out of our economy with virtually no notice, setting the legal precedent for other nations to sue our nation for war crimes and torture and terror. And worse, Saudi Arabia would come into court and say, all right, let's look at the evidence of 9/11 to see who really did it, and that is someplace the U.S. government dares not go, because there is no evidence of Saudi involvement in 9/11. The evidence all points to the U.S. government and to Israel. All right, we're going to take a phone call. John in Barbados, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, to continue in this vein, Michael, aloha.
Aloha, nui.
Yes, well, I've got some news for you. The Gulf Cooperation Council are in agreement with Saudi Arabia, and it looks like the whole of the Gulf. You know, you said that these people would stop selling their oil for dollars. They'd need to do it all together. It looks like it's going to happen, because it's been approved by the Gulf Cooperation Council.
Oh,
so
boy,
we're
that's...
now at Saudi Arabia and all those Gulf states selling their oil through a bourse which doesn't require American dollars. This will be a killer. As I pointed out the other day, this will be the bigger killer than the withdrawing all their funds from America. Because if America can no longer get a piece of the action of all this trade going on in the world, that's the end of American economy.
Absolutely. That is absolutely the end. That's a kneecapping right there.
Yeah, well, it looks like maybe this notice that the Gulf Cooperation Council gave support to Saudi Arabia may be one of the reasons why Congress is now backpedaling, and the Congress and Senate on this bill.
Mm-hmm.
I think they'll still have a bill, but I think they're going to refine it a little, because it opens up the U.S. to all sorts.
Yeah, they're already saying that the reworked bill will be much narrower in scope. And of course, the big issue is going to be somebody will have to actually show evidence that Saudi Arabia was involved in 9/11, and it's not up to the judge's discretion. Because judges are not omniscient. They're not omnipotent. They can make really dumb mistakes. Remember that judge who got caught with a marital aid under his robe during court sessions? I mean, these are some pretty goofy people out there. And, just leaving up for the judge to say that, well, I think that Iran is committing terror, and I think that Saudi Arabia is committing terror. That violates the founding principles of this nation, that there has to be proof of guilt beyond a reasonable doubt before the government imposes a penalty, and they're trying to throw that out.
Well, to me, the biggest blunder was this, reversing of Barack Obama's veto. I think they did it to themselves, and they deserve all they get.
Oh yeah, they're going to be seen as having blown this one, and it was a classic case of the Israel firsters in Congress wanting to prove they were still in control and that Obama's a lame duck president and they don't need to worry about him anymore, and it has backfired horribly on them.
Yeah. And just one last point, Michael.
Okay.
As far as I know, I'm getting more information slowly through various channels, but Aleppo is on the point of collapse.
Yes.
Most of the people who actually live in that small southeast part of Aleppo, most of the civilians are already out. So now that the Syrian Arab Army and the Russian Air Force and Syrian Air Force can pound away without hardly any civilian casualties because they've all escaped already.
Well, good for them, and that does in fact end this push we're seeing to sell an invasion of Syria on humanitarian grounds. If the city is empty, it's already rubble. It's a perfect war zone. We're going to take a moment here to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining our network. We're back talking about all of these conflicts and battles that are going on around the world here. So John, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go, and we're still going to keep the phone lines closed because I got a bunch of stuff to get through. We're probably going to open up the phone lines top of the third hour here. Let's talk about the economy. Markets around the world got hammered as Deutsche Bank loses nearly 9%. Clients are starting to pull their assets. And over in Great Britain, the head of Deutsche Bank there had to send out an email to the staff to keep them from panicking, to keep them at their desks. Now, of course, amazingly enough, here in the United States of America, the stock markets had a stellar day because the Federal Reserve has all this cheap money that they create out of thin air and loan to you, to the American people at interest, to give to Wall Street to keep the stock market looking good because that is a big banner going into the election. But it's not really a solution. It's all a giant fraud. And as you know, fraud in the United States is now legal. It's supposed to be a felony, but it's legal. But sinking Deutsche Bank is sending shockwaves across Europe, also Asia. The Asian markets got hammered as well, and nobody knows where this is going to end. In fact, a lot of people are saying this is just the beginning of what's going to happen. And now we are hearing that margin calls are going on out from Deutsche Bank to their various investors who are participating in the stock market. And that's a red warning sign when the margin calls are going on out. And we're heading into another major economic crash. Last time Lehman Brothers got scapegoated for it. This time it could be Deutsche Bank. So what kills off a bank? It's not solvency, which is a lack of capital. Deutsche Bank has assets. It's got its buildings. It's got various other long-term investments. What kills a bank is the loss of liquidity. Immediate, accessible, cold, hard, fungible, something of value. If there's a run on Deutsche Bank, they're going to run out of liquidity. And we need to be prepared to see that begin because it could happen very fast. Remember during 2008, it took Lehman Brothers just a few days for their stock to go from almost 100 down to absolute zero. When the panic hits, it's going to be like lightning speed. Now, I've very often compared what's going on today with the fall of the Roman Empire. And I got a lot of people who've written in to say, well, the decline from Rome to the medieval period, it took a long, long time. It was a gradual transition. Well, it was limited by how quickly news would spread, which on horseback and sailing ship, it could take 3 to 6 months for the fact that Rome was in meltdown to reach Great Britain. And by then, it's separated by distance and time, and the people in Britain were saying, big deal. In the modern age, when one of these banks starts to come apart, it'll be instantaneously known all over the planet. It'll be immediate news to everybody, especially those holding those derivatives, and those are the big problem. And a lot of people are looking at Deutsche Bank, and they're seeing it as being 2008 all over again, because they've made the same mistakes all over again. And the reason they made the mistakes all over again is they didn't suffer any harm in 2008. You did. You got punished for what Wall Street did in 2008. You were made to pay for it all. You had to see your standard of living go down. Nothing happened to the Wall Street bankers. So of course they're going to do it again. They love bubbles. And we're back in the same mess all over again because the money junkies have not been given an incentive by the U.S. government to mend their ways. So Deutsche Bank has lost 9% of its stock value and still going to be heading down. Commerce Bank has lost 7% of its value, it's cutting 9,000 jobs, canceled a dividend. And Angela Merkel is out there trying to claim that this is all the fault of Brexit. If those British people hadn't voted to leave, everything would be just fine. No, it would not. Deutsche Bank ran a bad business. Private central banks are inherently unstable. And there comes a time when they have manufactured so much debt, there isn't enough money available to deal with it. It's going to crash the system. Brexit's got nothing to do with it, but Merkel's already out there trying to protect them. And that's a very odd thing for her to do, because remember when Germany was trying to get their gold back from the New York Federal Reserve and J.P. Morgan? Deutsche Bank, which is Germany's private central bank, literally interceded and went to the German government and said, you don't need to get your gold back from the New York Federal Reserve. We trust our fellow private central bank. We know that they've got it on a bookkeeping entry, and that's as good as gold. No, it isn't. The only thing that's as good as gold is gold. Paper doesn't matter anything. And if you are getting ready to invest in precious metals, and you should be right now, forget those stupid paper contracts, because they are leveraged hundreds to one. They're running it like a reserve currency. And that means when the gold run begins, when the silver run begins, most of the people holding those pieces of paper are going to be out of luck. If you want to invest in precious metals, and I suggest that you do, have the physical metal, have it under your control. Because the U.S. government has already passed laws saying that the banks, when they hit a crisis, not only can they help themselves to your savings accounts, they can go into your safety deposit boxes for valuables, including those coins. And I'm a great believer in investing in gold coins. Unfortunately, I found out too late that they really lose most of their value once you eat the chocolate bit out of the middle. Now, Wells Fargo has been fined $24 million over illegal repossessions of cars from service members, military service people, who had their car loans with Wells Fargo, because there is a special law that protects military people, the Service Members Civil Relief Act. And it's a good law, because military people, they're on the other side of the planet. They're dealing with lots of issues ordinary civilians don't have to deal with. and they deserve some special consideration. Frankly, I think we all need better protection from the money junkies. But I agree with this law for the service people. Apparently, Wells Fargo repossessed 413 cars owned by service members without obtaining the required court order. So it's fraud on top of fraud on top of fraud on top of fraud. And when you see this much fraud taking place in the banking sector, what it tells me is the real economy of the nation. We go to work, we make decent money, we buy houses, we buy cars, we buy things at the shopping malls send orders to manufacturers, the manufacturers order raw materials. That economy has already ground to a halt. And that's why they're relying on fraud to keep things going, and fraud is that last final step before collapse. Look at all the fraud Deutsche Bank was caught in, and now they're at the edge right now. Now, the big, ugly unknown, of course, are those derivatives, which are unregulated. And people in the know have been demanding regulation of derivatives for decades, and they're ignored by the U.S. Congress, the finest Congress money can buy, and most of them are bought and owned by Wall Street. That's why they repealed Glass-Steagall, which led to the 2008 disaster. So, let me explain what a derivative is, because a lot of people are still unclear on this. You can think of a derivative as a financial instrument whose value is based on another financial instrument. And in this case, we're talking about a derivative called a credit default swap, which is like an insurance policy. If I invest $10,000 in Consolidated Lint, I buy a credit default swap so that if Consolidated Lint goes out of business, I can get at least a portion of my original capital back. That's how it's supposed to work. Now, you can think of it as a fire insurance policy. But there are rules for regular insurance. For one thing, under a regular insurance, you must own the asset being insured. I can insure my home against loss by fire. I cannot insure my neighbor's house against loss by fire, because obviously I would have a motive to go over there in the middle of the night with a can of gasoline and a road flare to cash in my insurance. And regular insurance companies are required to keep adequate cash reserves on hand in order to pay a reasonably expected number of complaints. So far, so good. Here's the problem. Because derivatives are unregulated, you can buy an insurance policy on something you don't actually own. And you can buy them over and over and over again. You can you buy the credit default swap for many times the insured asset's actual worth. And the companies selling these credit default swaps are not required by law to maintain adequate cash reserves to meet an expected number of claims. That's what happened to AIG in 2008. They had grown incredibly rich selling derivatives on these mortgage-backed security bundles. And because they figured it was just going to go on forever, they didn't keep any of the money in cash reserves. They just wrote it to themselves in bonuses. And when the meltdown happened, AIG was caught completely off guard, and it vanished. And all those people who had bought those derivatives turned around to the government and said, we need the taxpayers to bail us out. And the government said, well, yeah, of course. That's what the taxpayers are there for. So right now, it is estimated, and again, it's an estimate. Nobody really knows for sure, but it's estimated. Global exposure to derivatives by all these banks and investment companies around the world is now at $2 quadrillion. Now, $2 quadrillion is 22 times the entire global gross domestic product combined. That's an absolute nightmare. If all of that were to come due at once, the system would collapse. There simply isn't enough money in existence. And who knows, maybe they'll just turn on the printing presses and they'll get out of it that way. We'll be like Zimbabwe, we're walking around with paper notes in our pockets saying $100 trillion. And it'll look good on paper, but that $100 trillion won't really be worth much of anything. It'll be worth 25 cents. So, we're coming up here on another commercial break. When we come on back, we're going to be talking about the economic news because the stresses and strains and fractures are showing all over the place. And you're not seeing any of this on the corporate media, are you? We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And more news from Wells Fargo. Apparently the CEO has been accused of dumping a huge amount of his stock while he was aware of the growing scandal of the phony accounts, but before it became public. In other words, insider dumping. And, of course, he's denying it. He just felt like he should get rid of his stock at that particular moment, and there's absolutely no reason for us to blah, 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 blah. Now, over in Saudi Arabia, even though the U.S. government is now backtracking on that bill to allow families of victims of 9/11 to sue Saudi Arabia, the stresses and strains are showing. Saudi Arabia got slammed by this poorly thought out oil price war against Russia. And they've had to issue government bonds for the first time in decades. And they're in trouble, even though oil prices are going up. OPEC is trying to drive the prices back up again. Saudi Arabia's markets are basically in panic. Currency forwards are collapsing. Risk of default is growing rapidly. Their bank stocks are at record lows. Now, an alert observer spotted over at the New York Federal Reserve, the commercial shredding companies are back. They're destroying paper documents for some reason, and there was concern that a van belonging to a professional demolition and dismantling service was parked right in front of the Fed's master cargo door, which is just a short distance from the New York Federal Reserve's gold vault. So people are kind of concerned about that as well. Let's see. Okay, now I just got an email back from the Deputy Director of the Franklin County Board of Elections saying that they're not aware of anybody who has found already filled out ballots for the coming election. Unfortunately, he's just talking about absentee ballots, and the ballots that were found are ballots to be deposited at the polls. So I'll have to get back to him on that one. And, of course, if he himself is a Democrat, they'll never admit it. They'll never admit it. Now, getting on back to the economic news. As you know, Obamacare is in serious trouble. It has been an absolute unmitigated disaster, both in its overt purpose of making health care affordable to Americans and in its covert purpose, which was to bring a windfall of profits to the health insurance companies that actually authored the law, with the U.S. government getting a piece of the action in taxes. It's failed both of those. We all remember the disaster of the website. Huge amount of money to build a website that 12 IT students were able to duplicate in a week's time. Remember when we had John McAfee on the show here and said that website could have been brought in for $12,000 instead of the millions they gave away. Well, part of the Affordable Care Act obligates the U.S. government to cover shortfalls in the insurers, and now they're saying we have to have it. There are about 175 health plans in the ACA marketplace that are losing money. And so Obama, in order to not have to go to Congress and explain why this thing has failed, because after all, it's his signature legislative achievement, he's going to plunder a special Treasury Department fund, which is supposed to cover federal legal claims. It's a litigation fund, but Obama is going to basically take that money and give it to the insurers. Robbing Peter to pay Paul again. Now then, story coming out of Breitbart. Hillary Clinton's State Department allowed millions of taxpayer dollars to be spent helping companies outsource American jobs. And the interest is focused on USAID, which is known to be a covert NGO working for the U.S. Government and very much on board the globalism agenda, trying to bring down foreign governments that are resisting the New World Order and to basically help spread America's wealth over the rest of the planet because we want to be fair to all those people. And apparently USAID was taking huge amounts of money from the American taxpayer and building special schools in places like Sri Lanka and Armenia to train those people to take jobs away from Americans. That's how obvious it gets. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And I guess we can go ahead and open up the phone lines now. I do have a lot of stuff to get to, but we can go ahead and start taking calls here. And let me tell my control room guy, Mike, that we're going to go ahead and start taking phone calls. But again, only if important, because we got a lot of stuff. Now, do you remember not too long ago there was a big stink over how on the very same day Iran released 4 American citizens that had been arrested for doing illegal things in Iran. And there was an unmarked cargo plane that delivered a huge amount of money in euros and Swiss francs that appeared to be a payoff or bribe. And the White House said, no, it was merely a payment on something that had been negotiated long ago, and it was just a coincidence it turned up on the same day, even though the 4 Americans were reporting that they were told by their Iranian hosts their plane would not be allowed to leave until this other cargo airplane with the pallets of cash showed up. Now there's been a new development, story coming out of the Wall Street Journal, no less, that the U.S. government signed a secret document to lift UN sanctions on Iranian banks on the same day Tehran released the 4 Americans. So there was a quid pro quo. All right. Now then, a top economist in Germany is saying that the refugee crisis, ultimately, on the course that it is on, will cost 1.5 trillion euros. And especially with it looking like Deutsche Bank is going to take a dump into the Al-Qaeda, they don't have it. This will bring chaos into the streets across Europe. Because those refugees will be hungry and angry. The Europeans will be hungry and angry. There will be blood in the streets from this, and maybe that was the design goal. Get everybody killing each other off and leave planet Earth in a natural form for the money junkies. One of the last of the Tom Clancy books that he wrote by himself before he started using ghostwriters was Rainbow Six, which talked about this group of ultra-rich people who wanted to kill off 90% of the world so that they could have a natural Earth for themselves to live on. And it sounds very far-fetched until you remember, first of all, Tom Clancy's track record at getting these things right before they even happened. And then you hear people like Bill Gates, who's out there saying, we've got to reduce the planet's population, we should use vaccines to just kill all these human beings off here. So, now, over in Great Britain, their trade minister is saying Germany risks becoming a giant ATM machine following the Brexit, meaning cash is going to be flowing out of Germany if there's any left after Deutsche Bank collapses. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Tom in Florida. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Tom, are you there? Hello, Tom?
His phone goes blank sometimes.
Okay, I'm not hearing you, Tom, so... Hello, Tom?
Hello?
There you are. Okay, I was about to put your face on a milk carton. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Michael, I just want to talk about Goldfinger, which is, Goldfinger is, Soros. He is Goldfinger. If you ever seen the old James Bond movie, that's what I call Soros. And, We know who's behind the design you're talking about, the illegal flooding of immigration and all that. And you got Hillary rotten rat down here in Coral Springs, Florida here today speaking about what's wrong with bringing in more Syrian refugees. Basically, this is all by design, and you got Goldfinger, Soros, whatever you want to call him, is behind this, probably along with the Rothschilds to flood America, and so it doesn't look like America anymore. We're going to be turned into the Middle East.
First of all, I think you're confusing Goldfinger with Thunderball, where that was the one where the Spectre was using a front of bringing immigrants in here. But I think there's a much better precedent, and it's a movie called $1 Billion Brain. Was Michael Caine. It was sort of the third in the franchise following the Ipcris file, and it basically talked about this billionaire who hated the Russians and wanted to remake the world, literally trying to set off World War III all by himself. And George Soros reminds me of that billionaire character who was played by Ed Begley. Just huge amounts of money and thinks the world is his to play with, and we're just going to have a world war and get rid of those gosh darn commies and, kill off a bunch of people so the world is a lot more comfortable. And the plan could simply be for the coming world war. Blow everything up, and then all of a sudden you got jobs to rebuild what you had before.
Michael, one more thing Trump does bring up. The Afro-American community is killing each other at alarming rates worse than they do in the Middle East. And I guess you look at all the cities in the United States and inner cities, it is a war zone. And a lot of people, all the media say, Trump says we're radical and all. Come on, he's telling the truth. The man is absolutely telling the truth what's going on.
Yeah, he is.
There's no jobs. I mean, there's no jobs. It's just unbelievable. And here in South Florida, Michael, I don't know if you're aware of this. These Cubans keep coming here getting the wet foot, dry foot. They get Section 8 housing. They're getting all these freebies that Americans who've been here for hundreds of years could not get.
Yes.
It's unbelievable. And all the Venezuelans, they had a survey in the Miami Herald. 74% of the Venezuelan population wants to come to South Florida. The Herald wrote that story about 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, it's out of control, and the end result of all this blending of people together in all these countries, when the economy comes apart and everybody's starting to get hungry, there's going to be civil war in the streets, and maybe that's the goal. Get everybody to kill everybody else off and, preserve the world for the money
Michael,
junkies.
You're right on. You're absolutely right on. And Donald Trump brought up in the debate $20 trillion in debt. And I can tell you, Michael, I know people, financial people, they said once that deficit, that $25 trillion, there's no real in it at all. It will be everything you said a minute ago. It's once it hits the $25 trillion mark, it's just what you said. It will be like Venezuela, chaos, 700% inflation. It will be off the charts. And you know what? Hillary is this world. She's being designed by Soros and the ilks of her and the Rothschilds. That's exactly what they're trying to do to this country. They're trying to punish and ruin this country. The great founding Christian males. And Jules, I call them the Christian males, the founding fathers. They're trying to wipe them off the face of the earth of their teachings of this great country of ours. I honestly believe, like I said, all you got to do is look at Venezuela, look at Cuba. Actually, Cuba's turning out more to be like we were. We're turning out more like Cuba.
Well, they got great car mechanics down there in Cuba, and good rum and good cigars. I think there's an issue. We saw an article today where there is now a pushback starting to happen in the Christian churches in the United States of America. All of them, all the different denominations are basically telling their congregations to start pushing back against George Soros because of the growing perception that he is anti-Christian and trying to basically erase their religion and supplant it with another. And I think his goal is just chaos and confusion.
I totally agree with you. I tell you, I think he's like you say, the other guy you said in the movie, but I call him Goldfinger or Dirty Finger, or whatever you want to call him. I just don't know.
All right.
Michael. Anyway, thank you for taking my call. God bless you and have a great day.
All right. Well, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. Now, as you know, conveniently timed to support the U.S. campaign to demonize Russia, the so-called independent Dutch investigation into Flight 17 came out with a report once again saying that we're pretty sure it was a Buk missile built by Russia and fired from Russian-controlled areas in eastern Ukraine. And part of it was there are no Russian-controlled areas in eastern Ukraine. There are the eastern Ukrainian republics that want to break off and be independent. But Russia is correct in pointing out this report doesn't really have a lot of actual hard evidence anywhere in it. They didn't even go on out and do a forensic analysis of the crash site. They claimed because it was a war zone, it was dangerous. And the Dutch report was basically written totally on statements made by unnamed anonymous Ukrainian intelligence sources. So basically all the Dutch report said is Ukraine says that Russia did it, and that is our conclusion. Meanwhile, Russia has published radar data showing that there was no missile coming from east of Flight 17. They're not sure what may have been coming from the west. But they basically came on out with this data and say whatever happened to Flight 17 did not come from Russia, did not come from the eastern Ukrainian republics. Now, here is where it gets interesting, because if you look at the photos of the actual wreckage, what you see are air-to-air cannon shell holes. The book Surface-to-Air Missile, most surface-to-air missiles use what are called expanding rods that are basically accordioned around the explosive charge. They get blown out, forming a cutting tool that will slice through wings and cables and hoses, and it's certainly far more effective, especially at high altitude, than a simple explosive itself. You have to have some kind of shrapnel that does the real damage, and you damage an aircraft most by a slice through it, because even hole punches are not as effective. So I am still of the opinion that this was a botched attempt to assassinate Vladimir Putin, who was returning from a 6-day tour of South America in his presidential airplane, was in approximately the same area at the same time as Flight 17, and Putin's presidential jet is a converted commercial passenger plane, and it's painted in the same colors and a very similar style to the livery of the Malaysian Airlines aircraft. And I think a couple of pilots were sent up there to shoot down Vladimir Putin. They got eyes on the wrong target, shot down the wrong plane. That's what I think happened. Makes the most sense to me. All right, we're going to take another phone call. John in Missouri, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I was wondering where you think a person in his 60s should put his savings.
Should put it into metals and ammunition and other barterable items and keep it at home hidden very, very carefully.
Thank you very much.
All right. We're going to let you go. I mean, at this point, looking at how the banks are behaving, looking at how all these governments have set up laws to make it legal for the banks to help themselves to your money when they get into trouble. I mean, when I was a kid, having a savings account was a way to keep your money safe and to make it grow. And now, under the current situation, it's not safe, and it's certainly not growing. And this negative interest rate temporary patch has backfired horribly onto banks around the world who are paying negative interest on savings accounts and having to loan out money at negative interest rates just to keep it look like it's going. Donald Trump is out there saying the big crash is going to happen before the election. And certainly if it does happen before the election, it's going to help Donald Trump because he's been out there saying this is broken. Hillary's out there saying, oh, it's all wonderful. Everybody's got jobs. We're doing just great here. And if you don't think the country's in great shape, then you're being a sexist tinfoil hat wearing kook wingnut conspiracy fruitcake. So forth and so on. Now let's talk about what's going on in education. Because our schools are turning into Abu Ghraib. And Huffington Post did an investigation and found out that since 2011, school police have used tasers on students in at least 84 incidents. Now, forget the name taser. It's a cattle prod is what it is. And forget the claim that it's non-lethal, because we know in point of fact they can kill. If that jolt of electricity hits your heart at the exact right point in the beat cycle, the heart will go into fibrillation and you will die. And we've been reporting all along, people who are tased and they die, and the official word is, well, they must have had some unknown medical condition. It could never, ever be the tasers, because these are non-lethal. We have told you they're non-lethal, and you should believe us. School kids are being given electric shocks. And I understand kids can be a little bit unruly, but again, what I said the other day, look at the example being set for America's young people by our government. If you can't get along with somebody, you shoot them. If you can't get along with somebody, you drone strike them. If you can't get along with somebody, you waterboard them. That's the example our government is setting for our young people. Now, we were talking the other day about how the father of this young Muslim who built this cool digital clock, and he took it into school to show to his teacher, and everybody said, oh, it's a bomb, it's got to be a bomb, it's a bomb, and called the police on him. The father is now suing the media for defamation, for going the story by saying, oh, it's a bomb, it's a bomb. When anybody looking at that should have known immediately, it's a digital clock. It's the kid's science project, and we should be encouraging him, not sending the cops after him. Well, there's been another similar incident, and there was this kid at school, and by accident left his USB drive in the computer lab. High school senior. And the other student picked up the USB drive, opened it up, and saw this student's project in support of the Second Amendment. And what happened is the police showed up at the home to investigate this kid because he believes Americans should have guns. And he basically said this was a project from the last school year. He wasn't doing anything criminal. This was homework. He got an A on it. And even though the police said, yeah, there's no threat here, the school administration suspended the student and subjected him to a forced psychological evaluation for daring to write a school project saying Americans have a right to keep and bear arms. This is what passes for education in this country, and this is why our young people can't compete against the rest of the world in a technological global marketplace. Now, we're going to be taking a commercial break. We've got a caller waiting on the line, and we'll take that call just as soon as we come back from these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to go to the phones here. Bernard in Vancouver. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Michael. I don't know if it was because I was talking about something controversial yesterday, but I haven't been able to get your number for your on listing since then, so I don't know where you're at. But I just wanted to mention something. You mentioned you were going to be interviewing Margot Kidder at some point.
Mm-hmm. Well,
we're kind of, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I don't know what the political thing. She's actually described as a Canadian-American actress because she was born up here. But I saw her presentation at a medical conference in Vancouver a few years ago. And, after that kind of public breakdown she had in Los Angeles, she had a very happy ending, but it didn't get much coverage because she went to a leading Canadian alternate scientist and physician named Abram Hoffer, and she said that his advice on nutrition, that is what saved the day for the most part. That she did credit acupuncturists as well. But
yeah, I mean, given what we know now about how bad corporate medications can be with all their side effects, it's entirely possible that Margot was suffering an adverse reaction. I mean, again, if you look at all these very expensive, slick commercials for modern medications, listen carefully to that very fast voice at the end, and they're telling you what can happen. Suicidal thoughts, depression, this stuff can absolutely kill you. Now, the situation with Margot Kidder is we're in regular communication. She came back from the Dakota Pipeline protest. I don't want to go into details. I don't want to invade her privacy, but she's dealing with an illness right now. And it's serious enough where I told her that we're just going to put the interview on hold, and when she is ready, we will go ahead and do it. She wants to do the interview, but the last time I spoke with her on the phone, it was just she's dealing with a lot right now.
Right.
Okay.
Well, thanks. Look forward to it. Thank you.
All right, and we all send our good wishes to Margot and with everybody else who's dealing with illness right now. And I did try and connect with the organizers of the Dakota Pipeline protest to find out if perchance there had been a whole bunch of very ill people following the protest, but I have not heard back from them. All right, we're going to go to Francis in North Carolina. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, aloha, Michael.
Aloha.
I have a serious point for you, but first of all, in light of Hillary and aspect of whether she's a man or a woman or maybe a being from out in space or whatever, I have to pick a bone with you, my dear, because quite frankly, even a being out in space has more dignity in 1 millimeter of their being than she has in her entire body. Now, with that being said,
okay.
Hey, what can I tell you? Is it possible?
Well, hang on a minute. If these alien space beings have dignity, why are they always running around naked in the science fiction movies?
That's because they are free. I mean, they don't concern themselves with these stuff.
Yeah.
Never mind. I'm not going to go there.
All right. Listen, I'll tell you what. I'm going to put you on hold, Francis. We got to do a top of the hour break, and I'm going to come back to you for your more serious comments. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and we're going to go back to Francis in North Carolina. You had something a little more serious to talk about.
Yes, and just to let you know, thanks so much for the good laugh. I needed it, believe me. I have a very interesting scientific question for you, and I'm not one for science, believe me. Is it possible, entirely possible, for a hurricane to have a double eye?
I have to be honest, I don't think so. They can come very close to each other. If you remember the perfect storm and the story of that fishing boat that got lost, it represented a merging of 3 separate storm systems, but when they merged together, it formed just a single eye. And
gotcha. Well, there's a reason why I asked that, because over here in the Atlantic, they have what's Matthew, which has now been promoted to being a Category 4. Now, this is between the top of South America and the Caribbean islands. And when you look at the radar graphic or whatever of the rain that's going down or moisture going down or whatever, it looks like you have a pair of eyes, not just one. And it's like that is the most funkiest thing I have seen yet. I am not kidding you. It almost looks like an owl.
Okay. Well, let me take a look here at the National Hurricane Center. Hurricane Matthew.
Well, funky, that's funky looking.
Yeah, well, it's definitely taking a sharp right-hand turn right now, and it's definitely going to give the Cubans a lot of grief, and the people in the Bahamas. I'm not seeing the radar track here just yet. I'm going to have to find another source for that. I think it's theoretically possible for 2 storms to merge, but they would basically create one. I mean, if you really think about it, given Coriolis effect, you're going to have one side of the storm moving in exactly the opposite direction from the other storm merging with it. So that would be something I'd want to simulate with a finite element analysis. But if you could send me the URL to that picture, I'd love to take a look.
Well, this is via the local news weather by WRAL.com, the local news site online. It's a local news, and it's very simple to pull up. They have it on the main page, as is at the moment.
Okay. What was the name of that station again?
WRAL.com.
All right, I'll take a look at that right now here. I see what you're looking at. That almost looks to me like bad data. I'll have to take a look at that. I don't want to do it during the show because we've got a bunch of people listening to us right now. But that does look interesting, but it almost looks like they've overlapped two out-of-sync radar frames, because if you look at the NEXRAD system, it isn't a big single radar. They're all over the place, and they try and merge them together. But we've seen it out here in Hawaii when there's a major storm that actually shuts down one of the NEXRAD stations, takes it offline. We'll get misregistered data, and I have to be honest, that's what this looks like to me, is misregistered data.
Fun over there.
I'm sorry?
They're having fun over there then. Okay. I'm just saying they're just having fun with the radar then.
Well, they're not having fun. They're having technical difficulties with the radar.
Oh, well, to each their own.
All right.
You have a great...
Same to you. Thank you very much. Now then, let's talk a little bit about the right to keep and bear weapons. And this is following on to that high school student who got a visit from the police, was suspended, and ordered to undergo a psychological evaluation for writing a school paper in support of the Second Amendment. And so we have this other story that has come out from CNN about how two men attacked a 39-year-old mother in the parking lot of, I think it was a Walmart, and they hit her over the head. She had a baby with her, and these other two guys came to help, one of whom had a gun, and saved the situation. The baby was completely unhurt. And this is why we need to have concealed carry or even open carry, because the police didn't show up until a while later. The police are never there when the crime is actually being committed. Now, there's a video that we put up. This is from RINF.com, Rachel Blevins, illustrating 5 cases where armed citizens saved lives and stopped mass shootings. And you never see this on the corporate media. You only see the successful mass shootings, followed by the usual plea that Americans must give up their guns, from the same government that is arming terrorists and Mexican drug cartels. All right, we're going to take a second here to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just rejoining our network. We have a couple of calls waiting on the line, but before I get to them, I want to talk about that protest against the pipeline up in the Dakota Territory. First of all, environmental scientists are coming down on the side of the Native Americans, saying, yes, this is a risk to the environment. It could poison their drinking water. They have every right to be concerned, especially when you look at that Colonial Pipeline disaster, which, by the way, has disappeared from the corporate media. But the big stink now is apparently the Native American protesters were holding a peaceful prayer meeting. And the police sent in militarized armored troops, including shotguns, to scare these people away. That's how fascistic we've become. All right, Steve in California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, Michael, you're kind of an expert on the JFK assassination. I just had a question for you about Alan Dulles, who was part of the Warren Commission, and I wonder if you've ever thought about maybe that he might have been the inside guy to kind of tie up all loose ends and make sure they came to their conclusion one shooter, and he was the inside guy to kind of push it in one direction and make sure that nobody else looked in other directions.
They all were insiders. They were all there to make sure that the truth was buried and only the official story came on out. John J. McCloy was there to protect the involvement of the Federal Reserve. Alan Dulles, who had been fired by John F. Kennedy over the Bay of Pigs, was there to keep the intelligence connections out of there. Everybody was there to protect a certain part of the cartel that had carried this on out. And it was a whitewash from beginning to end. And apparently Chief Justice Earl Warren was never 100% comfortable with being asked to chair this, because he knew going in that he was being asked to put his good name on a big steaming pile of U.S. government bovine excrement. And the reports are that he was not at all happy about this, that he was very angry with President Johnson, that Johnson literally arm twisted him or forced him or found some other way to motivate him, because Warren didn't want to be part of this right from the beginning.
Right. Hey, thanks, Michael.
You got it. Thank you very much. And we're going to go to Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike.
Hi.
Hey, did you hear any report of a Fox News reporter seeing an NBC intern delivering a package to Hillary Clinton's residence dressed as a FedEx employee?
That story came and went. We weren't able to confirm that. There are videos out there that are suggesting Hillary's custom-built podium. Remember, she had a custom-built podium. It was built to her size to make her look bigger. There are indications it may have even had a teleprompter, flat screen in the top surface of it. And there's a video that we linked to where apparently there were several of Hillary's workers who were going to that podium after everything was over and removing not just papers but bits and pieces and trying to basically get the equipment out of there before people realized what had happened.
And Mike, I'm going to switch on to MH17. Look, the Netherlands, they're all part of the same group.
Yes.
You know, like you knew this was a setup when the plane was diverted over that area and it was shot down by a Buk, but it was shot down by the Ukrainians because they were using an older style rocket. Now, but the plane was diverted and then it was told to drop down lower. So right there, that tells you the plan was to knock it down and blame Russia. And then all the, this goes back, Orange Revolution, Sochi. That's the target.
Well, you could very well be right. You could very well be right. But again, part of the recklessness, it was a ridiculously dumb thing to do, and they didn't get away with it. We're at a stage right now where anybody who's inside the government or the intelligence agencies who's even considering a false flag, they need a psych evaluation more than that student did, because nobody is believing any of this stuff. It's like the one they uncovered in France the other day, where there was this cave full of ISIS flags and radio equipment and video equipment and all this other stuff. And everybody's there, and all of a sudden some big shot from the French military comes on over and says, this is all of our stuff. I can't tell you what we're using it for, but it's all our stuff, and you should go away and forget you ever saw it.
Yeah, because like Paul Craig Roberts says, this is the group. It's all puppets. And they're going to go along with the same agenda line. That's why the Russians weren't even involved in this whole investigation.
They wanted to be part of it, and the Dutch investigators, the only people they were listening to were these Ukrainian intelligence sources.
Yep. And remember the Spanish person working in the airport control room, right, said that they came and confiscated all tapes and evidence, right?
I remember that.
The plane being diverted and all that. Yeah, so people need to realize, it's all this one group. If people don't believe they'll kill you, look at 9/11, just look at the cities in Syria or, Libya and Iraq. These people don't care how many people they kill. They
don't. The body count for World War III so far is already numbering up in the millions, and they absolutely could care less. They love each other and they love their kids, and you're never going to see the rulers or the money junkies' kids out there on the front lines. If they serve in the military at all, it's going to be in some rear echelon safe position where they can pick up a couple of gratuitous medals for their eventual political career. Not many people know it, but that was the reason John F. Kennedy went into the Navy, is he was already getting a reputation as a womanizer around Washington, D.C., and Joe Kennedy said, you're going to join the Navy, you're going to go on out to the Pacific Ocean, you're going to stay in the rear areas, nothing bad's going to happen to you, and you're going to come home, and you're going to be this naval officer, as part of your eventual political career. And then quite by accident had that whole PT-109 incident, which made him a hero. And he did behave correctly with that, rescuing his fellow shipmates and everything. But yeah, that's part of that whole engineered reality that we're all living in. Anyway, Dustin, we're going to let you go here. Thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to move on here to some other stories. Talking about computers. And apparently last week, there was a big scandal that erupted. This was the lid was ripped off by Wall Street Journal. Found out that Facebook and Twitter were fudging their ad data rates and artificially inflating the amount of time users spend watching the videos by as much as 60 to 80%. This would increase the ad rates that these advertisers were paying, and they were cheating. And both Facebook and Twitter took a hit on their stock prices, as well they should. Now, Edward Snowden has been granted an award by the German city of Kassel, in absentia, for showing courage and conscience in blowing the whistle on the NSA's unconstitutional and illegal surveillance of ordinary law-abiding Americans. And basically they've given him this award. It's called the Glass of Reason. And I think it's a very good thing that they did, because we all need to remember that motive comes into play here. Edward Snowden was blowing the whistle because he saw the government behaving badly and felt he had to do something about that. And to many people, that makes him a hero. Now, those who are leaking government secrets for personal gain, those are the ones that should be being prosecuted, and yet the FBI just said, we're not going to recommend charges, and Loretta Lynch said, no. We live in an upside-down society where the criminals are protected and the law-abiding citizen, the good people, the honest people, the ones who want to bring about a positive change are being punished and persecuted. And that's exactly what's going on. Now, I've talked many, many times in the context of how unreliable and short-lived modern computer technology is by pointing out that I have this Commodore VIC-20 up here that still works absolutely perfectly. And there was a story that came out today in hothardware.com where apparently there is this auto repair shop that has been using a wheel balancing system based on a Commodore 64 for the last quarter of a century. So when you go on in to the local Best Buy or Circuit City or wherever, and you say, I'd like to buy a computer that's going to last a while, and they say, well, that's impossible. I said, no, it is possible. Because these old machines from the dawn of the computer age are still working. This one up here works, that one works in the wheel balance. Modern computer systems are built, designed to fail after a few years, to force you to constantly be buying new equipment. And for all the talk about progressive policies in this country, this is anti-progressive because you're not allowed to progress. You're being forced to work constantly just to stay exactly where you are. We can't build for the future when we're constantly having to rebuild today over and over and over again. Now, as you know, cybercrime is completely out of control, and we're finding more and more cases where back doors are being found built into the hardware that we are being forced to buy over and over and over again. The latest concern has to do with a D-Link wireless router, specifically the DWR932B LTE router. And they're saying, get rid of it. Because apparently it has 20 known vulnerabilities. 20 known back doors. Default credentials, leaky credentials, vulnerabilities to the firmware upgrade, insecure UPnP. Where are all these things coming from? Well, the NSA is mandating these backdoors be put into all the hardware. So when somebody breaks into your computer and they steal all of your files for your new products so that they can make money and you are left destitute and poor, you will know who's to blame for it. The National Security Agency, far from guaranteeing the safety and security of our IT infrastructure, has gone the other way. They have punched holes in all of our systems, which are always inevitably being found by the cyber criminals, on the assumption that the cyber criminals are not the NSA themselves. And remember, Kaspersky Labs said the equation group of hackers is NSA. And they've left us wide open to be plundered at will by the cyber criminals. This is deliberate. This is intentional. It doesn't matter how much you spend on security software, because these backdoors are actually burned into the metal itself. You can't get rid of them. You can't patch the chip. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be back after these few words. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking about computers. We're talking about the government spying on law-abiding citizens. And Senator John McCain out in Arizona, who never met a violation of the Bill of Rights he didn't love, is introducing an amendment that will grant the FBI even more surveillance powers than it already has. To just watch you. You're being watched. Big Brother is watching. And apparently it's a particularly nasty piece of legislation because McCain has introduced it as an amendment to a water resource bill. And that's one of the big problems we have with our current system of government, is that politicians can take a bill that will pass, like the supplemental funding bill, and they'll put all these riders on there for things that nobody wants, but they'll have to vote it through. And that should not be allowed. In the blueprint for the new America, every bill will be for a single purpose. And this idea of, a bill to expand the highway system and other purposes, that will not be allowed anymore. One purpose, one bill. No riders. I don't even know that that's in the Constitution here. All right, let's talk about human-caused global warming. And they're out there celebrating that the Paris Climate Agreement has passed a crucial threshold. And basically 200 countries have pledged to keep the world well below 2 degrees Celsius of warming to stave off the worst impacts of global warming. So what they're going to do is tax the people for carbon dioxide, and since the world is getting cooler naturally, we'll declare the program a resounding success, because that's how politicians like to work. Now, an Arctic expert on sea ice is saying we could reach zero ice within 2 years. Horror of horrors. This is from Dr. Peter Wadhams, a self-proclaimed expert on Arctic ice. Remember when Al Gore said the Arctic would be ice-free by 2014? Didn't happen. Remember back in 2000 they were saying snowfalls are a thing of the past? That didn't happen. It's just another scam to get your money and obedience to save the world from you icky-poo human beings out there and get rich in the process. And they're starting to use global warming in the political campaign. Apparently, hundreds of members at the U.S. National Academy of Sciences, which, as the name implies, is subsidized with your tax dollars, have signed an open letter saying, vote for Hillary Clinton or the planet will fry. It'll just go into meltdown if Donald Trump is allowed. So what's really going on out there? It's snowing in Colorado's high country. It's already impacting hikers, and this still, at least for today, is September. More scaremongering out there from the Daily Mail in Great Britain. NASA's Kennedy Space Center could soon be underwater. Sea levels rising because of global warming. Actually, the Kennedy Space Center is built on a swamp. because that was the cheapest land they could get as far south as possible without being in the Everglades, which nobody wants to be there. In the early days of NASA, when it was still being called Cape Canaveral, they had a problem with, they'd go on out into those pits, the blast pits for the rockets, they'd find wildcats and crocodiles down there. And even today, before a launch, there's a group of people that go around with shotguns letting them off to scare the wildfowl out of the area to stop an impact. It's a swamp. Swamps tend to be rather sloppy and sinking. And again, there are places where they're measuring and saying, oh, the sea level is rising, and it turns out, no, the land is sinking due to tectonic forces. The land on planet Earth is not fixed and immutable. Now, we are seeing in the satellite record that, in point of fact, we're seeing another record ice gain in the Arctic and more early snows across the northern hemisphere. The old Farmer's Almanac is right. It's going to be another hard winter. And they're going to be out there saying, oh, no, pay no attention to that. Here, look at this pretty little chart. We spent millions of your tax dollars. You have to believe that chart. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Pardon me. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to finish up with human-caused global warming before I start taking phone calls. And we've got 3 calls waiting on the line right now. Apparently, the winter in Utah is off to a major start. The Wasatch Range is looking at a foot of snow this weekend. Snow has arrived early west of Calgary. And here's kind of the kicker here. Remember when Hillary Clinton promised to run a carbon-neutral campaign? Well, Chelsea Clinton went to an environmental event, 330 miles. She took a private jet to do it. Yeah, there's carbon neutral for you. All right, let's take some phone calls. Janet in Kansas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello. By the way, I've followed you for years. But the question I have is, do you know anything, or do any of your listeners know anything about the quantum satellite that's in orbit right now? It's a China-built thing.
Mm-hmm.
Is it it is functioning right now, and it's supported on the ground by several quantum computers, which are faster than anything that the U.S. sees, quantum supercomputers.
Well, okay. You're blending two different things here. Okay, let's start with the satellite first. Okay, they're calling it a quantum entangled radar system that can supposedly defeat stealth.
Yes.
That's the claim. The quantum entanglement is claimed to basically be taking place within the radar's emitter, so that the radar beam somehow is being influenced by the quantum entanglement with atoms that are still, or photons rather, that are still inside the radar itself. And it sounds like a step forward along the principle of interferometry, only in the radar frequencies. That's the story on the radar. Now, quantum computers actually began in the United States with research where they're using the quantum state of the atoms in the memory bits to store additional information. In our present conventional von Neumann type computers, each memory bit can either be 0 or 1, but because of the use of the quantum states, memories in quantum computers can be in any one of 33 states. And this gives them certain advantages in certain categories of problems. But as it's turned out, the commercial quantum computers that are on the market, and they are out there and they're hideously expensive, it turns out that once you move away from the demos that come with the box, their real-world performance on real-world problems is about the same as a more conventional supercomputer. So like the promises of the transputer and the connection machine, they fail to live up to the expectations. But if the Chinese radar system is in fact able to defeat stealth, then that is a game changer.
It is. It is. But the second question I had, is it possible that that technology could be moved into a quantum communication system? We have a whole different internet.
Well, it could be, and it would have the advantage that it would be impossible to spy on the communications. There's already quantum encryption, where if anybody tries to do a man-in-the-middle insertion into the communication stream, it changes the quantum state of the photons, and that can be detected at the remote end to say this channel has been compromised.
Yes. Okay. Well, that answers my question.
Okay. All right, we're going to switch over to... Thank you very much. Have a good weekend. We're going to switch over to Mateus in Canada. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
And the last caller said she was following you for years. Isn't that stalking? I was joking.
No, I wear sandals. I don't wear stockings.
Oh, okay. That's what I meant. You read my mind. I got a feeling that Hillary True Supporter talk shows are not talking about quantum computers. And one more thing on the light side, and then something serious, is you were talking a lot about dead voters today, and really upset with you for discriminating against dead voters. It's ageism. And, these are some of the most down-to-earth, grounded voters, to the salt of the earth, these people. So,
literally salt of the earth.
Politically very, inappropriate there.
Well, I don't think it's necessarily ageism, because people can die at a very young age. I think we need another word for that, where we're discriminating against the dead. Maybe it's zombieism. I don't think zombies should be allowed to vote.
Whatever it is, a lot of people are offended.
Claire is laughing in the other room.
Okay.
Anything else?
Good, I got one. Yeah, so the podium at the presidential debate, there is 2 cubbies in each podium pedestal, and one on top of the other, divided by a shelf.
Yes.
And the bottom cubby both has something in it, which is not important. And the top shelf for Trump is empty the whole time, before and after pictures, before, during, and after pictures. And then Hillary's cubby is filled full of something that looks like some sort of a box of equipment.
Yeah, I saw that. And she could have had one of her mini iPads up there on the top of the podium.
Well, yeah, I'm thinking that it's a 2-part system for a secret teleprompter that she had. I think that was a wireless receiver transmitter, as well as the processor for the teleprompter. And
she did look down a lot during the debate. She kept looking down at the top of the podium a lot during the debate.
Yeah, well, we got the smoking gun evidence for this. There's a black piece of glass or plexiglass that's inlaid into the top of the podium that just looks like decoration. It's about above where the notepad would be. And then on Trump's, it always stays black. But at Hillary's, at the very end, it was white. But then we saw it get turned off.
Then it turned off. Yeah, we've got that video. We've got that video linked to WhatReallyHappened.com. Like I said all along, if there's a way to cheat, Hillary will do it.
Definitely. And there was a very careful choreographed removal process of this box on the top shelf. And what it was is Bill Clinton and Hillary and an aide, they were shaking hands after. And then right at the right moment, Bill put his arm around his wife, and then an aide got involved, and they walked towards the podium just as a 4th staff went in and grabbed that box.
Yes.
And when there's forensic analysis of this. When you look at everyone's eye contact and you can just tell that's what they were rehearsing for those 6 days, is all this tricking and lying. She wasn't memorizing as much as we think, because she actually probably had some teleprompter. That's all I got for you. A great show. Have a good day.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to the analog anarchist up in Maine. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. I have a link for you if you don't have it for the Standing Rock News. It's bsnorrell, NORRELL.blogspot.com. Today's story will be on the top. If you scroll all the way down, you'll find an address which you are seeking.
To find out if there's been an illness of people. Yeah, I see it.
Yes. Okay. Wanted to pass that on. If you do searches on Google or on YouTube, it won't find them. But if you use her headline, oftentimes it will come up that way with a video. That's all I have. Thank you.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. A little bit of a backtrack into the financial world. Now, remember, one of the reasons Deutsche Bank is in trouble is they were sued by the United States Department of Justice for $14 billion because of Deutsche Bank's criminality leading to the 2008 mortgage-backed security meltdown. The whole thing was a fraud. And the Department of Justice went on out and said, you caused billions of dollars in damages, we want those billions back. And Deutsche Bank has flat out said, we're not going to pay it. And the latest word right now is the Department of Justice has very quietly walked away from the vast majority of that $14 billion demand. And they're now saying Deutsche Bank is going to settle for $5 billion. And they may be doing it to try and stop Deutsche Bank from collapsing. Or it may just be another case of the U.S. Department of Justice grabbing headlines and trying to look like they're tough on the criminal bankers, and then very quietly down the road they go and it's nudge, nudge, wink, wink, and they bump their elbows to each other and smile. And all those ordinary American investors, pension funds that got destroyed in that mortgage-backed security fraud, they're just going to be left hanging with the losses. Ostensibly, the reason for the $14 billion settlement was, at least in part, to recapitalize all these pension funds that are in trouble. But no, it's more important to take care of the banks than it is to take care of ordinary people. So, the corruption just knows no bounds. Interesting little article coming out of Zero Hedge. The DEA's own website proves the war on drugs is an epic failure. And they're out there still trying to classify marijuana as a Schedule I drug, meaning it's just as dangerous as meth or heroin. And it's already come on out that the alcohol and tobacco industries and lobbyists are putting pressure on the DEA to keep marijuana demonized. Because if you can grow marijuana in your own backyard, then you're not going to be going on down to the tobacco shop for some cigarettes. You're not going to be going on down to the bottle shop for bottles of alcohol. And that's what this is all about. Taking away from you your right to grow and make your own goods, whether it's a relaxant, medication, food, and make you permanently dependent on corporate providers of things that in a free society you'd have the freedom to make. Now, the reason the war on drugs has failed miserably is because it's really a war on the competition's drugs. Because we know the biggest drug smuggler in the country is the country. And all of this drug enforcement stuff is about keeping out competitors. The government is up to its neck in drug crime and drug money corruption. Look at HSBC. Look at Iran-Contra. The Skull and Bones fraternity at Yale University was founded with drug money. When the British fought their opium wars in China, they were buying their opium from here in the United States of America. That's why Barack Obama got on the president of Philippines' case, saying, no, you can't shoot drug dealers. We don't care what harm they're causing. You can't do that. We love those drug dealers. We value those drug dealers and all the money that pours in, and the EU leadership. If our country, if our government was not up to its neck in drug money corruption, then why would Obama have given a darn one way or the other over how the Philippines handles their drug dealers? Because at that point, the real agenda was supposed to be to use the Philippines to open a back door to war with China. And all of a sudden, Obama gets in there and says, oh, we have to protect the drug smuggler, the drug dealers. They're sacrosanct. You can't touch them. And he managed to screw that whole South China Sea agenda in the process. It was almost a knee-jerk reaction. Because after all these years of the war on drugs, our nation is still full of drugs. And we know that they're being brought in by U.S. assets. We have a page full of photos at my website showing Afghan opium poppies being guarded and protected by U.S. coalition forces, and U.S. forces, coalition forces, bagging and shipping sacks of the raw opium. That's how open this whole thing is. During Iran-Contra, it was cocaine being flooded into this country to fund clandestine activity. During Vietnam, it was opium from Burma being shipped into the U.S. through the CIA's Air America. The war on drugs is a war on those who would presume to cut in on the U.S. government's action. You know, the drug trade is ours. You're not supposed to come on in and cut in on our business. We stick the DEA on you. I've said it before, what we're seeing in this country right now is a replay of all the corruption that happened during Prohibition. Because Prohibition didn't stop the flow of alcohol into this country. It just made it a very profitable product for those willing to deal in illicit substances, criminals, who had enough money to eventually buy and bribe their way into the highest levels of the U.S. government. And the only way they were finally able to start bringing that corruption back down was to legalize alcohol again. And ultimately, I think that's what has to happen here. There are other countries around the world that have legalized or at least decriminalized to a minor degree these drugs. And guess what? The addiction problem goes away. Because if nobody can actually make money on things like heroin and meth, they're not going to be going on out there trying to lure young people in and get them hooked. The more you repress the drug trade, the more profitable it is for these criminals to go on out and offer free samples to little kids and get them hooked. When you take away that profit, the problem goes away. Yes, there are going to be some people who are still addicted, and you're going to have to deal with them with some kind of social program, but it has an expiration date on it, when either they clean their act up or they simply die. The goal of any responsible, mature drug policy ought to be to find a way to stop it from happening in the first place. And the best way to do that is take away its potential for profit. That's it. That's always worked. It's the only thing that works. Drugs are being made huge criminal offenses in this country in order to keep them profitable. It's entirely corrupted. And the United States is hardly alone in having a government that's up to its neck in drug money corruption. The people of Colombia put their own president on trial for being a drug lord. He was unfortunately acquitted, but my hat's off, and I applaud the people of Colombia for at least having the courage to try and deal with the problem. All right, we're going to take a break. We'll be back with the last segment of our program after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here on this Pauhana Friday, last segment of our program before we get into the weekend, and hopefully we'll be able to do some relaxation. I am getting email from people who are using Gmail as their mail provider that mailings from the Donald Trump campaign are automatically being routed through to the spam folder. And I don't know how widespread this is, but it seems to be another case where the owners of all these social media, email providers and everything are openly on board with Hillary Clinton and are basically shortcutting to try and get her into the White House. And it's definitely very much a concern. Now, that story that we mentioned before about the finding of these ballots cannot confirm at this time. And I've marked the story on What Really Happened as cannot confirm. But we do know all these other stories about fraud, dead people registered to vote. Those are all real. Those are all confirmed. Hillary cannot win the election honestly. She's going to cheat. She's going to try and steal it. And we have about 35 days to figure out how we're going to prevent her from stealing this election. Or we're going to have 8 years that are going to be worse than what we've already been through. Voting for Hillary Clinton is going to continue the path that we're on. And we know where that path ends, underneath a giant mushroom cloud. Now, out in California, they have a huge drought problem. Part of it is the deterioration of the water infrastructure. The aqueducts are cracked. They're leaking huge amounts of water where it does no good. The water mains under Los Angeles itself, same problem. Huge amounts of usable water pouring out where it doesn't do any good. And then you have Nestle has bought up some of the aquifers to resell to the California people, and fracking waste has rendered some of California's aquifers unusable now. Well, the Los Angeles Water Department is out there still running its sprinklers. They're on a timer. The sprinklers are out there. And it's a little bit crazy because apparently the lawn in front of the Los Angeles Water Department is plastic. It's fake grass, but they want it to look good. Where the water department, we're going to spray water all over the plastic grass here. Mayors in Miami-Dade County and Miami Beach have gone public saying that the Department of Health has been trying to hide the locations where Zika mosquitoes have tested positive for the virus, and obviously they're concerned about protecting the tourist industry in these areas. These are the heart and soul of Florida's tourism industry is around that whole Miami-Dade area. And so the tourists are not being told what's going on there, just like tourists to Japan were being lied to about Fukushima. I remember when there's the music. All right, I'll save the trip down memory lane for Monday. There's the music. Time for me to get on out of here and have a good weekend. Remember, you are all part of the independent media. Your job is to take what you learn here, what you see here, what you find on the website, and gently share it with everybody that you know. We're in a fight for the future, not just of the United States, but of the planet as a whole. And it's for all the marbles. This is serious. We'll be back on Monday. Aloha, America.